It's no secret that writing can be lonely work, but does it really have to be? Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, you'll get insights into the tricks, tips, and production habits of writers from every level of the biz. From best-selling authors to those launching their first novels, you're sure to be in the company of friends as we encourage great writers to divulge and share their secrets. This is the Great Writers Share podcast with your host, best-selling author, Daniel Wilcox.
Hello and welcome to the Great Writers Share podcast with me, Daniel Wilcox, where every week I pick the brains of the hardest working writer talent I know in an effort to absorb their years of knowledge and turn myself and anyone listening into a superhuman. Today's date is the 6th of November. Halloween is over. I've been recording lots of podcasts and trying to get ahead on this podcast, which has been fun considering that yesterday was firework night, which meant that in some of the episodes coming up, there might be a lot of banging in the background, but I think we did quite well to get past that and to not be interrupted too much. October has been one of the busiest writing months of my life, and I'm happy to say that it's over, but I'm also very, very glad that I went through and did a lot of that work because there's going to be a lot of output and a lot of reward for that over the coming months. But the reason I'm sort of talking about this is that it reminded me how important it is to enjoy the actual journey of what you're doing and to try and remember to take the joy in putting the words on the page, connecting with readers and the whole process of writing. Because I think it's very easy sometimes just to get bogged down in the rigmarole of just going and sometimes you've got to stop and breathe. And the last couple of days, apart from recording the podcast, I've been doing that, which has been absolutely lovely. I've actually spoken to quite a few authors that will be upcoming on the podcast, which is very, very, very exciting, but I won't spoil anything for now. But today's guest is Jon Cronshaw, who is someone who I came across about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, met a couple of times in person at conferences. That was a Slack notification. We'll ignore that. And he is someone who he's very, very good at finding new strategies and trying to implement creative ways to get to his end goals. And some of the things that we talk about, number one, we talk about his Ravenglass Chronicles, which is his serial book series that he's been putting out lately, which have recently achieved bestseller status, and he's put out 11 of those in the past year or so. So he talks a lot about how he's using the serial format to actually create larger works and to sell that and to find a way to make money while you're putting in the work. We talk about using podcasts to create real connections with readers. Jon's very deliberate about connecting with his readers and looking at the long game as opposed to the short game and making sure that those connections are there. And we talk about how stoicism can positively impact your writing life and how he has embraced stoicism as a philosophy into his life and what that looks like in terms of getting the words on the page and also just dealing with stuff in his own personal life as well. Jon opens up quite a lot in this interview, and I want to say at the beginning, if Jon, you are listening to this, which you should be, thank you for sharing and for opening it up. It's massively appreciated, and I think a lot of people will take a lot from the things that you say in the upcoming interview. There's a teaser if ever you want one. But before we go into the main set of the interview, I will do a quick shout out to the Patreon page. So this show is entirely funded and supported by the folks over at www.patreon.com/greatwritershare, where for as little as $1 a month, you can support the show. You can get access to a load of extra bonuses. We've got early access to episodes. At a certain level, you can get involved in the Slack group. Anyone can ask authors who are coming onto the show any of their questions. You get entered into the monthly giveaway, so for just $1 a month you can get involved in absolutely loads. And speaking of monthly giveaways, the monthly giveaway for this week, we had suggestions from all of the guys over on the Slack group of books that they'd like to see given away, and then we voted for that on the Patreon page, and the winner by a considerable margin was Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism. So if you become a patron, or if you are a patron for this month, November, then at the end of the month, you could be entered into a chance to win a free copy of Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism, which I've not personally read myself, and it's definitely something I'm going to get a copy of. But it is a book that I've heard a lot about, and it's meant to be very useful in looking at how you can peel back a lot of your life from this cluttered social media culture and actually remain productive and get on and do those kind of things. And one additional bonus that I am going to offer to anyone thinking of becoming a patron between now and the end of the year is I am going to open up the Slack group to anyone of the $1 pledge point. So for as little as $1, you can jump straight into the Slack group, which is normally a $5 pledge, which comes out every month. So if you've been on the fence, if you're thinking about getting involved, now is your chance to do it. And what I'll do is I'll basically honour anyone who becomes a $1 patron within now to December will get access to that Slack group for 6 months, whether they are a patron or not. So my aim there is basically to try and build up this community, try and get more people involved, get the conversations rolling, and just give you guys a chance to get some value from the show as well. So if you want to get involved in the Patreon page, that's www.patreon.com/Great Writers Share. But now, without any further ado, I am going to let you guys have your ears caressed by the one and the only Jon Cronshaw. Enjoy. Jon Cronshaw is the best-selling author of such fiction titles as the Wasteland series, the Ravenglass Chronicles, Blind Gambit, and the non-fiction Stop Booking Around. Jon's titles span the genres of post-apocalyptic, epic fantasy, GameLit, and much more. As a former freelance features writer, Jon has had work published in local and national newspapers across the UK, including the Metro, Yorkshire Post, and the Guardian. He is also a self-confessed voracious reader, guide dog owner, ex-gamer, and certified geek. Jon, welcome to the show.
Howdy, it's good to be here. Been enjoying the previous podcasts, so it's good to be on board.
Nice. Always good to have someone who's been listening along as well. And for people who don't know, me and Jon did speak. Well, we've spoken a few times over the years, but we did have you on my old podcast, The Story Studio with Luke Condor. And we were saying just before we were recording, that was about a year and a half ago. So I guess the question for me is, what has changed dramatically? Is there anything stand out within that time that's changed dramatically for you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose moving to Serial has been a big one. And also having... I suppose made a few mistakes along the way and a few missteps, I suppose. But the Serial thing, I've really embraced that. I'm just about to release book 12 in my fantasy series. So there's another 9 books of that to go. So that's been a lot of fun. And now that I've released the 11-book box set of the first part of the series, it's been bestseller tag for over a month, so that's nice.
Is that continuously for over a month?
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper into that, because this is quite this is very, very interesting, and it's a tactic that a lot of people talk about, but I don't see a lot of people actioning. And I think I've seen from following bits and pieces that you're doing with this series, you've been very consistent with it. You're very deliberate in what you're trying to achieve. Can you give us a little overview on what the Ravenglass Chronicles is, how you're approaching it, and the tactics you're currently making to put those books out?
Okay, so as a brief overview, this is basically my self-indulgent epic fantasy concept album. So each episode of the series is based on a tarot card. So it's based on one of the cards in the major arcana, which is like the popular cards that you'll see that are like the Hanged Man and Death and the Fool and all those kind of things. So I've been going through the series, writing these books, releasing them, trying to get them out each month. I had a bit of a misstep earlier this year with one of them, but they've on the whole been consistently coming out each month. And what I'm doing is, I'm going for the epic fantasy reader. I'm targeting the people who are reading the fantasy serials that are coming out every month, like Sarah Wilson's doing. Well, she's been doing her Dragon School series and things like that, and also actual tarot fans as well. So people who are into the tarot are getting my series and then leaving reviews that are, inspired by the tarot, saying, it really worked, how they use this card for this. And so I'm using it to kind of come up with the themes and the world building and things like that. So this is one of those ones as well where I've been releasing them at 99 cents. They've not been making a lot of money. It's just been a ongoing thing. I was waiting basically for this box set. So my tactic with this is 99 cents release, making money off the page reads. So this was, I've been talking to an author called Brandon Ellis, who's a sci-fi writer, and he's been mentoring me on this stuff. And this was the big thing that he suggested, was basically get a big box set that you can just get with the page reads. You're not going to make money on the sales. I've been selling consistently. I sell about 40 copies a day at the moment, but the money is coming in through the page reads, and that's good.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Brandon Ellis is a fantastic guy as well. He's definitely someone to good to learn from. So obviously you said these are epic fantasy. How big are each of the books? Because I think if you say epic fantasy and you're talking about 11 books, people are going to think, they're going to be 100,000, 200,000 words each.
No. Yeah, well, this is the thing as well, is I saw a bit of a niche in people who were a bit annoyed with epic fantasy books being 2-hour killers. So I went for the, I like when I market them, I talk about them as like bite-sized epics or epic fantasy for people in a hurry or, that kind of thing. So it's getting the feel of the epic fantasy with the epic story that is, when it's finished, it's going to be somewhere in the range of about 500,000 words. But each episode is 20,000, 30,000 words, that kind of area. So, it's a nice, it's a nice afternoon's read, but at the same time, it's not a big thing that's going to take me years to do. So.
No, I really like this tactic because you're essentially finding a way to look for the end goal that you want, which is this big series, but to find a way to be putting it out, to be making, to be drawing attention to your books as you're going along, and obviously also to be making a little bit of money along the way. I think it's a really, really clever tactic. And
that is the plan, really. It's basically so I can fund it as I'm writing it, because this is an indulgence, really. I love epic fantasy, but I know that this is going to take me a long time to write. I also know that it's not going to make any money if I sit there and write a trilogy, because when I finish with this series and it's lost its way, it's run out of juice on Amazon and all that, it's going to be repackaged as a trilogy because I've written it with those kind of endings in mind. As you go through to the end of book 4, there's a big game changer. At the end of book 11 is a big game changer, and then you've got the rest of the series coming, which will be book 3. But so I'm working on it as novels, but each book has basically ends with a game changer or some kind of twist to hook you onto the next thing. So,
and it's in a genre that you've not actually, or as far as I can kind of see, I think you've sort of dabbled in a bit of epic fantasy, but you've not really gone hard for that genre. So how are you finding building that interest into those books and obviously navigating away from some of the other things that you have done?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've found, because I think my reading, what I read is, my favourite genre is epic fantasy. It's the big fantasy books, people like the Robin Hobb and the George Martin and Scott Lynch, people like that. So this is kind of where my heart is. I mean, even with the post-apocalyptic stuff, I mean, the titles were all spins on fantasy tropes. There was Wizard of the Wasteland, Knight of the Wasteland, King of the Wasteland, that kind of thing. So I've been into this kind of fantasy thing. It's just, I didn't feel that when I came up with this idea, because I came up with the idea for this epic fantasy in about 2009, I didn't feel I had the tools to be able to do it. I didn't feel I had the skills as a writer in order to tell this story. And now, because of doing 4 novels and feeling better with writing and storytelling, I can now do it and feel like I'm handling it really well. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And so have you had any people following you from the other genres into fantasy at all? Are they separate lists of fans from the other books, or are you sort of trying to guide everyone into everything that you're reading? I'm just trying to work out, because obviously it's a lot of genre hopping in your background, and I was just trying to work out how that comes together.
This I know this is a bad thing, isn't it? But I mean, I know I need to focus, but there's this space opera that I want to write, and then there's this the trouble. But my strategy all along has been list building, and I do have a big overall list, but they are segmented. I've got I do a lot of targeted list builders and things like that. So I've got a list that is specifically, for example, like people who are Game of Thrones fans who I've targeted to get into my series, and then there's Lord of the Rings fans and things like that. So I do kind of have it on that granular level, and if something is relevant to all those people, then it goes. I mean, I send a weekly newsletter and I do my podcast and things like that. So all that goes to them, but I'm not going to necessarily send a deal to get my first book of the Wasteland series to free for the people who've paid for my Wasteland series. That seems a bit mean, to be honest. So all those things I do kind of segment, and I do kind of think, well, okay, these people will like this kind of short story, so I'll send them that, and these ones not so much. So I do try and cross promote. I want the Stephen King thing of people know what they get with the Jon Cronshaw. That's what I want, but I know that most readers aren't like that. They kind of stick to the lane and enjoy their genre. So it has been a bit of a weird one, because my post-apocalyptic readers are very different to fantasy readers, and in terms of temperament and in terms of expectations and things like that. So it's been a bit of a learning curve on that. But I think I send quite personal emails now, and I do my author diaries and things like that. So I think that connection is working.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to go into your author diaries in a bit. I've got a note to come towards that because that was something I came across in my research of you. But before we get into that bit, the process for the Ravenglass Chronicles, how does that look from your end? Because, like you say, you're picking a tarot, you're sort of targeting or shaping each book around these tarots. Are you thinking of the next idea for the book once you've closed a book, or do you have a sort of overarching plan of where you want the entire series to go?
Yeah, so I've got what I would call like marker posts. So I know where the series is going. I know roughly what the next 7 books are going to do, roughly. But I get to the end of the book and I've got all these pieces in place. I'll go back over the book and I will write down, okay, what do I need to kind of come out of this? How does this go with my overall outline? And then the tarot thing is more of a thematic thing and kind of imagery and symbolism that I'll kind of pepper throughout the world building and things like that. So yeah, that it's a process that is kind of outlined, and then it's also kind of pantsing because I'm kind of pantsing as I go through. I know that when I started, the outline for them, like the ending has remained the same, but bits and chapters and things like that are completely different now. So I know that I have responded to the cards in different unexpected ways. And I mean, this is just to go back to one of the reasons why I went with the tarot is when I used to play in bands, one of the things we used to do was try and throw some randomness into the playing. So it'd be like, right, look, we had these cards and it'd be like, right, switch instruments. So you do that. And it just kind of inserts some creative energy and unexpectedness. And like, I felt that was really lost from the creative process of writing. So the tarot has actually given me that randomness and that kind of creative spark that I felt was kind of missing in my first couple of books. So
I can imagine it's quite a challenge to pick one and be like, no, I've got to stick with this one, because the temptation must be there to be like, nah, I'm going to pick another one and see what that comes out as.
Yeah. So no, it's good. It's good. And just getting the things. I mean, what I like as well is the story, it still follows this kind of hero's journey kind of thing. But I've had readers go, this just doesn't go where I expect it at all. This is crazy. I love it. So,
bro, yeah. That's definitely what you want. Yeah. No, I think it is a fantastic way to build that overall thing. And I think I'm quite similar than you. I'm quite similar to how your process looks, in that I will plot an outline as much as I can for a big overarching series, but then I find that I tend to diverge a lot of the way. So I've started going to marker posts to try and give some guidance, but then I'm not too strict with where that's going, because I don't want to stifle that creativity of where the characters go, because I've definitely learned by this point that the characters will go anywhere but where you want them to go, which is quite a fun part of that process.
Yeah, and I've had that in my thing that I'm writing at the minute. It happened this morning with my writing session where my character decided to do something very unexpected, and I thought, okay, that makes sense, but you're not meant to do that. But it's now in, I'm keeping it. It's good. So
yeah, how can you pull it back? That's the thing, because it's just going to sound a lot more forced and unnatural. Because clearly it's your mind is telling you which way to put the story. And I think a lot of people trip at that hurdle, particularly early on in their author journey, and they think, no, this is my outline. This is where it has to go. But then that experience isn't going to be as authentic for a reader as if you actually just followed the way the story is telling you to go.
Definitely, because I think with my first project, I started off and it was completely pantsed and it didn't work. And then after that, I did a really, detailed outline and followed all the story grid things and things like that. And then I find that really hard to write because it's quite stifling and it felt like a slog. And so just finding that midpoint, it's like anything, isn't it? You just need to find what's good for you and what's good for the project. And, it's an ongoing lesson, isn't it, in mastery or whatever.
Definitely. Now, you have brought up your author diary, so I am going to jump into speaking a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about Jon's author diary, what it is, and what you're trying to achieve at the minute with that podcast.
I mean, it's my way of being accountable to myself more than anything. It's a way I can speak to my readers and give them an update. It's also what I use to write my newsletters. So when I do an author diary, I will put it through Dragon. It will transcribe the audio. and then I could send that to my newsletter every week. So all I've got to do is a quick one-pass edit and not have to think every week of what to do. And there's a thing as well of always having something to talk about. And so that's almost challenging me, right? I've got to be accountable. I need to have stuff to report. I can't just go, I didn't do any writing this week. So it's kept me accountable. It's kept me with the newsletters. I've been doing them for over 2 years now, and I've not missed an episode. So it's like an ongoing thing, and it's just, I think, in terms of my own, I like creating little habits for myself and little scheduled things that I do that just kind of, okay, this is like a full stop at the end of my week. So Saturday morning I'll record it, and then I'm done. Then Saturday and Sunday, I'll have off, and then go back to work on Monday, and then repeat. So
nice. And I was impressed because when we last spoke, I think I remember you talking about getting this started, or you might have just started at that point. You probably had, but
yeah,
I was looking at it today, and obviously you're on 109 episodes. That's over 2 years, and to have something that systematic that you are accountable for, that you do keep going for so long, I think it's really incredible, because a lot of people, and I think I can't remember where I read it, there was a line somewhere that basically said, particularly with podcasting, if you can get past episode 10, you're fine. A big percentage, I can't remember the exact number, was a big percentage of podcasters can't make it past episode 10, and that's where they all fail. And obviously this isn't just a podcast view, it's you taking a piece of content and you're multi-purposing it into a load of different things and making your process quite efficient. So how did you come about the idea? Was that what it was originally intended for, to be all these different things, or was it just, like you say, a case where you could end that week and just go, I'm accountable, this is what I've done?
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to this. Number one is the idea of Paul Teague.
Yes.
So I really liked his author diaries. So I mean, his podcast, Self-Publishing Journeys, give that a plug. It's a great podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I met Paul Teague before hearing the podcast. I met him at an event in Carlisle, and we kind of networked and connected there in person. So that was really cool, and we were talking about author diary kind of stuff at the event, and I liked the sound of it, so I started putting together my ideas for that. Now I wanted mine to be, because his is for other authors, mine is for readers, is what I like to think. So I'll talk about stuff that I've read and stuff that I've written and anything that's inspired me, and I might ramble a bit about Stranger Things or something like that. So that's been good. I mean, I think podcasting is just a really good way to connect with people, because I listen to podcasts all the time. I think when you listen to podcasts on a regular basis, you do feel like more of a connection. Like, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts. Like, I feel like I know you better than the sum total of our personal conversations. We've interacted online and things like that. But because I know your voice, it's like I know how you speak and your cadence and things like that. So I think that's really useful on a connection level, because I think that's kind of where my marketing's focused, is just getting these personal connections and kind of keeping them there, and it's having it as much about my journey as the books, if that makes sense.
And why do you focus on that connection? Because a lot of authors, and I mean, I worked in marketing for a few years, and I know that businesses, particularly the businesses I've worked for, tend to focus a lot more with acquiring new customers, or obviously in our case readers, rather than creating those stronger connections with the readers they already have. Why is it that you instinctively are looking to tighten those connections?
Because they've already come, haven't they? It's like I want them to come back. I want them to anticipate when I've got something coming out, and I want them to feel a deeper connection with my work. And when I talk, because I am quite honest on my podcast, and I do talk about some of the struggles I have with things like mental health, or I'll talk about it here, but like my dad took his own life in the summer, and at the time, just out of pure coincidence, I was writing a book called The Hanged Man, and he took his own life through hanging. So that was a really difficult thing to talk about and share and things like that. But I got so many positive messages from people, not for my own benefit, but for their benefit, who'd heard that and were kind of thankful that I'd shared, and they opened up about things that had happened to them. And so little moments like that, where you kind of creating that meaning, it's almost like it's the marketing and the selling, it doesn't matter. It's like you're actually creating genuine connections and meaning, creating meaning for people. And I think if you can do that as a producer of any kind of content, I think that's, you're doing something right.
I think that's the one thing that's missing a lot from a lot of authors. I won't obviously name any personally, and I'm not going to pick people out, but some people that I've come up against, it's a case of they, like I said earlier, they tend to go for new readers and they'll constantly be pushing and pushing and pushing rather than trying to embrace those connections. And there is something rewarding about those moments where readers do reach out and say, this has impacted my life, this has done X, this has done Y. And I know that some of the conversations I've had with a couple of readers who have had very, very serious illnesses have said about the fact that the books have taken them away from that and they're giving them a bit of escapism. And those moments where they reach out really are quite impactful, and it must be quite nice to have that with the podcast as well.
Yeah. And like, I did a book called Blind Gambit, which was a very personal book as well, which was about my experience of dealing with visual impairment. And, having blind readers and, basically any readers with disabilities who got in touch with me about that book, it's like, yeah, okay, I kind of did what I wanted to with it. It kind of hit them in the right way. And yeah, so having that kind of connection, I think, it's I don't know. I read a book by Ryan Holiday a few years ago called The Perennial Seller. And one of the things it talked about in that was like not immediately going for the now market, and to build up these fans and people who genuinely care and connect with you over time. And so it gave the example of like Iron Maiden, who don't get played on radio, but they're still touring around the world in their private jet and, selling at arenas and stuff. So they've created a kind of niche and a kind of fan base of rabid fans who are, showing the stuff to the kids and getting them into it. So that's the kind of thing that inspires me, is this kind of long-term thinking rather than just, okay, what are the tactics now? What are the market things doing now? It's like this long-term connection thing.
Yeah. Have you read Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So I think, it alludes what you're talking about there for readers, anyone who hasn't seen any of this. There's a lot of sort of articles and things about there about cultivating those real true fans that are going to purchase and lap up everything you buy. And I think Kevin Kelly puts, if you have 1,000 true fans that are just going to buy your stuff every month, every year, then you're pretty much set, and that can be your full-time career. And I think it's a good model to aspire for. And a lot of your works, from what I've seen, have put in a lot of your thought processes. It's clear that there's a lot of you in everything that you do. And you spoke a little bit there about Blind Gambit, which I read, I think, probably about, when did it come out? A year ago? Maybe a bit longer than that.
Yeah, May last year, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like about your work is that you tend to take what people might argue as sort of, what's the word? Looking for the sort of really marketable genres, but then you will put your own spin on it, because obviously lit RPG, GameLit was a genre and still is a genre that's booming, that's rising, that's growing. And you've written this novel within that kind of world, but you've taken that visual impairment side of your life and spun that into that. How did you find that was received when that came out? And is there anything that you sort of changed, or anything that you're sort of really proud of from that book specifically?
Yeah, mixed. As I say, it was the people I wrote it for got it and really loved it. I mean, the reviews are great for it on the whole. Some people were like, "Oh, the disability stuff's a bit of a drag." It's like, well, yeah, you try living with it, So that was good. I mean, that was a one for me kind of book. That was like the book I felt compelled to write, to tell that story. But it's also, I was thinking of the market. I was thinking of like, okay, how can I write something that will have some kind of mass appeal that also deals with something, that's really difficult to deal with. So, I've got book 2 of that now drafted, ready for the editor. So
nice.
That is a thing that I'm doing. And I wrote most of that when I was doing my last guide dog training. So if you want a real kind of close look at guide dog training, that's where the story's going in that one. So that's what that is. So yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like I don't kind of consider that as one of my series, if you know what I mean. It's a bit weird. It's just like
bit of a passion project.
Yeah. And I think because I am in this for the long game, it's like I don't want to do the thing of following what's trendy now. I want to be able to sell these books in 10, 20, 30 years time, and I want to build up this kind of, as you say, this feel that you'll get from my books, which is it's a popular genre. Post-apocalyptic popular, gaming is popular, fantasy is popular, but you'll read it and it's like, okay, this has been twisted 45 degrees from the norm. So it's just trying to get that balance between the market and the art, I suppose.
Perfect. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've mentioned it a couple of times, obviously. So you are a visually impaired writer, and one thing that I did want to bring up, just because there must be any listeners out there who are potentially thinking about becoming a writer, and maybe you have a visual impairment of your own, or you think that there's no way that you can tell these sort of stories. How is it that you work around your visual impairment and actually get the words on the page? Because that must be quite a tough challenge to get past.
Yeah, I would. Most of my stuff I dictate, so I walk around all day talking to myself. I'm sure my neighbours think I've lost it, but so I dictate. I put it through Dragon, it transcribes it, and then I will go over it, and I'll do things like an audio edit and things like that. And then my wife's a trained editor, so she will do the kind of final proofread and line edit and things like that. So by the time I've done my third draft and my wife gets it, it's usually pretty clean and ready to go. And I was a reporter for ages, and I've been trained to do sub editing and things like that. So the word stuff is okay. I can write a sentence and my grammar's okay, apart from this sentence apparently. So yeah, it's just getting the words out is the thing. Dragon and doing that. I use like software like Zoom Text. Now I'm going to plug another podcast that I do here, just because I did a really good interview with an author called Wesley Britton. So I do a podcast called the Sci-Fi Roundtable, and we did an interview about visually impaired authors. And so he's got the same condition as me, but he's in his 60s, so he's completely blind with it. And so he goes into his process, which is different to mine. So that, go check that out, because that is that's a lot more detail if that's something that you're interested in.
Perfect. Another thing that popped up when listening to Jon's author diary, and again, you've sort of spoken a couple of times about a few different mental health bits and pieces. I heard you mention on the most recent episode about seasonal affective disorder. Yeah. How do you overcome that, and how does that affect your writing when you are trying to get the words down on the page? Because I think I wouldn't class myself as a full sufferer, but I definitely feel myself lagging and dragging around the winter times. But yeah, how is it for you?
Yeah, so in the past, it has completely sucked. There's been years where it's completely debilitated me, and I've found it almost impossible to get out of bed. I mean, I do, but it's like wading through treacle. So, I mean, let me think. Years ago, I mean, this is about 10 years ago when I kind of first really started getting it. And I think it is to do with my eye condition, because my retinas don't process light very well. So I don't absorb the vitamin D from the sun in the same way, and all this nonsense. So I take high-dose vitamin D tablets. I take vitamin B. I take St. John's wort. I have a daylight lamp set up, which is, just giving me that extra daylight stuff. And I do things now like I meditate every morning, I exercise every morning, I practice gratitude, which is amazing. It's like you're looking around for things to be thankful for all the time, and that kind of brings you out of that negative it's like a negative spiral, I suppose, of frustration and things like that. I don't go on Twitter anymore, which has really helped. So, because it's, if you want a cesspool of negativity, if you want to see the kind of the worst that mankind has to offer, just go and spend a few hours on Twitter and type in, I don't know, some hashtags like social justice or alt-right or things like that, and look for things like that, and you'll just hate humanity. So avoiding Twitter's probably the best one I do. So yeah,
it's the biggest one. To be fair, I avoid Twitter at all costs, apart from to retweet things that I've been tagged in. I do not like Twitter at all, but
Yeah,
there are people
I have
on there, so I do.
automated tweets that go out and it's on a cycle. So if you try and interact with me on Twitter, I might get back to you in a few months. So I don't know. Maybe there's like a big controversy about me on Twitter that I've not seen, but I've not seen it. So
The whole thread, which is hashtag Jon Cronshaw, and then
yeah,
something that you've done.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So and just practicing stoicism as well. Like I've found that kind of reading philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca the Younger and stuff like that has just really helped me just kind of be more balanced and more level, and realize that there's things that I can control, things that I can't, and just to kind of really focus on the stuff that I can control, and just to not let anything else kind of interfere with that.
Define practice, because I find that interesting, because we seem to be on quite similar wavelengths with the gratitude, with the meditation exercise, everything else, and it's stuff that I've been practicing as well. But stoicism is something that I'd say I'm fairly new into. I'm reading up, I'm sort of aware of the principles, and it's stuff that I think is useful and beneficial to have in life. That whole letting go of anything you don't have any control of is just absolute genius from the start. What does practicing it look like to you?
It's the same way you practice meditation. It's just it's an ongoing discipline that you do every day if you can, and you try to, and you often fail. But it's what's the word? It's like if you're getting knocked off a track and you just get shoved back into it. It's like you're always going forward towards something. You might get knocked off course, but if you keep going back to that center, which is this is outside my control, or this is someone else's opinion affecting me. Like I found that I'll give you an example, like reviews. I know authors. I was like this at first. I'm not like it now, because to me, a review is someone's opinion and it's a data point. So I can learn from it, but it's not an attack on me. It's not anything personal. A positive review should not make me feel happy. It should be more of okay, yeah, that's good. That reader enjoys it. Fantastic. I'm glad they did. But it shouldn't make me do cartwheels down the street because someone's given me a good review. And the same with bad reviews. Someone gives me a bad review, it shouldn't give you that gut feeling of like, oh no, this is like a personal attack, because it isn't.
I guess it depends as well where you choose to tie your ego, because if you're waiting for those stamps of approval from random strangers, then you're anchoring your happiness onto something that is dependent on someone else, and really that is something that you can work from within, is what I'm sort of garnering from stoicism at the minute.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a thing of, okay, this is beyond your sphere of influence, it's beyond your control. Are you going to let it dictate your life? Are you going to be a puppet to those kind of movements, or are you going to think of, right, what can I control? Okay, I can go and play with my son for 10 minutes. Brilliant, I'll go and do that. It's like these are things that you can look at in your life. It goes down to the individual. It can go out, it can expand into your community and things like that, but it's about focusing on making you the best you can be, and that also helps the lives of those around you, because you're a better person. You're not getting angry, you're not getting frustrated with things. You're a better person to be around. So it's just that, to kind of go back to your question, it is that kind of daily, it is a practice, because it's a daily awareness of it. It's a bit like the mindfulness. I mean, it links really well to mindfulness. It's just that idea of a constant awareness of what is pulling you, what's triggering you, and things like that. And kind of regrounding yourself in you, if that makes sense.
Do you think there's a growing movement with stoicism at the minute? Because like I say, I've started looking into it recently, and a few different podcasts that I've been listening to, people have been bringing it up, and it seems to be, I can't work out at the minute whether it is a growing movement that more people are becoming aware of and linking with mindfulness, or whether I'm in a bit of an echo chamber of, because I'm listening out for it, I'm now hearing it. Is it something that you've seen more of an awareness of?
I think there's more of a push for it in certain circles. I think in the entrepreneurial space, definitely. I think with stoicism, if you look back through history, when it kind of went up and down, I think the times when it is really useful are the times when there's a lot of chaos. And I think we're in quite a chaotic time now, especially politically, especially with just the financial system. There's a lot of things that we maybe grew up with that were seen as kind of big institutions, that were seen as reliable and solid. And I think that the internet and just the movement of the world has shifted that. So things like universities and big banks and education system, all those things, the media, things like that. There's now more distrust than ever in those institutions. There's more kind of chaos around them. And I think that when in chaotic times, it's like finding that place where there's order is usually a thing of, right, you go for yourself, you start at the individual and you move out, rather than being a chaotic person trying to change the world and you're in a mess yourself.
What is it that's sort of bringing you to these particular topics?
This does go back to the stuff I mentioned earlier with my dad, and as I say, I'd got this book, The Hangman, which is just such a difficult book to write, when every time I opened the file I was picturing what had happened to him. It was a thing where it was like, okay, I'm going to go and read some stoicism because I know this will help me. So I went and read quite a bit of I reread Marcus Aurelius and things like that, and I thought, I'm not going to be the only author who's struggling with this. It might be a different situation, but there's going to be a emotional blockage, call it writer's block, call it anything like that, that is stopping you from writing. And I wrote this book, I got through it, and it was thanks to this stuff.
And it's a testament as well, I guess, to the power that writing can have, in that it's one of the best mediums to actually help process things that you're feeling, help get you through certain situations. And I know that there have been times in my life that were dark, where I would just find myself at a keyboard just writing, and it was never stuff that I published because none of it was comprehensible in any way whatsoever. But there were times where it just feels like it is useful to get that off the page, and to be able to recognize that was that part that needed to sort of obviously process the stuff that you were going through, and then get back to the other work. How was that for you?
Very cathartic. Yeah, it really helps.
One of the questions that I do ask every or most of the guests that come on, unless they answer it within their wheelhouse of questions, is why do you write? What is the reason that Jon Cronshaw writes?
I mean, you've just given the reason yourself. I can't even think of not writing, if that, it's a compulsion at this point. I don't know if it's an addiction, maybe, but I need to write, because if I don't, I feel like my head just gets full. It's like defragging a hard drive, it's just getting rid of all the crap, and then I can get on with my life.
But then you also have your weekends off, which I think is quite, I guess I'm jealous of it, because I'm still at a point where I treat every day pretty much the same. Like, I'll get up at the same time every morning. That includes Saturdays and Sundays. In the evenings, I'll likely be doing something writing related. How the hell do you switch off?
I think just because I've got into that habit of like, write my author diaries out, right, it's time to go play and be a dad, because it's one of these things of like, I did get to a point where I was working every day. I was up until 11 at night writing, and just not burning myself out, but feeling like missing out on life. And it's like, well, I'm self-employed. Why am I doing this? If I'm not enjoying life now, and I didn't want to be one of these fathers who, when they look back at their dad, it was like, oh, he was always working, he was never there. I'm at home. It's like I need to be there with my son. I need to teach him how to be a good person, and how to build Lego, and introduce him to,
like how contrasting they were.
Yeah, teach him about what good films are, and good books and things. So yeah, just being a good dad is just massive motivator for me.
So what does your writing week look like then? Like you say, you clock off Saturday morning, you'll start on Monday. How do you structure your specific days?
Well, it's quite regimented, to be honest. So I get up at 4:45, and I spend about 45 minutes doing prep. So this is me prep. So it's the gratitude, the meditation, the exercise. I'll listen to a non-fiction book. It might be like a self-help book or a business book or something like that. Then I will do writing for 2 hours. This is usually first draft stuff. And then my son gets up about 7:30. So then it's his breakfast and school. So do the school run, get back for 9:30, back at the computer. I've got a nice cup of coffee going. Probably do till 11:30. Then I'll stop. I'll have a I'll have a strong coffee at that point, and then I'll have a power nap. So I call this a nappuccino. So this is basically I have a strong coffee, 15-minute nap, wake up refreshed, and then go into the afternoon, have some lunch, and then do, another couple of hours usually before got to go and pick up my son again, and then that's it. That's my day.
Okay, so you don't do evenings at all. It's just
I don't do evenings at all anymore, and Tuesdays are my admin, marketing, whatever that kind of stuff day. Yeah. So
okay, if you don't mind me asking, what are your sort of outputs word-wise per week? Because obviously you're doing the Ravenglass demands 20,000 at least, or 30,000 per month. What are your sort of weekly outputs word-wise?
It depends. It really depends. I've slowed it down a little bit at the moment just because of the SAD stuff. So at the moment, I'm happy if I can get 3,000 words done. I mean, it's more. It's usually 5,000 a minimum, and it can go up to 10. If I'm doing non-fiction, it's more like 10, 11, 12 kind of range. But that's first draft stuff, and then I think it's probably about 3 times that amount for editing. So I think I can edit about 15,000 words a day. So yeah.
Okay, it's good that you have a system, because I'm still at the point where, because you've been full-time for how long?
Oh, what was it? Since 2017? Yeah, something like that.
Because I'm definitely still in that phase of trying to find the routine that works for me. And one of the things that I found, particularly with podcasts like this, is different guests obviously have different time demands, and most of the guests that I have are from America. So it often means that most of my recordings are quite late at night. So trying to juggle that and trying to get some kind of rigid routine is still quite difficult, but it's slowly getting there. But obviously, I guess that takes work as you go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a while to get this. I mean, I've been doing this one now for about 6 months, and this is the one that's finally set with me. I think I remember talking to you about, you were saying you get up at whatever it was, 5 or 4 in the morning. I was just like, I'm not a morning person. There is no way I could do that, but I managed to do it, and I do it now. I get up at, as I say, 4:45, and I run an accountability group on Facebook for other UK indie authors, and I've got a accountability buddy, and we run I don't know if you've seen the Streaks app.
Yes.
So I use that every day, and then I can just click meditated, yes, and all that, and we share screenshots and things like that to keep us both accountable that we're both doing the work. So it's good.
Might have to jump into that group.
Yeah, it's just the UK indie author accountability group.
Okay, nice and on the nose.
on Facebook, yeah. So.
Nice. Perfect. Okay, so we're starting to come up to time now. So I do have a question from one of my patrons over at patreon.com/greatwritersshare, of which you are also a patron. So this is quite nice. And I don't know if Ian deliberately put it on because for people who aren't part of the Patreon yet, we have the Slack group for people who are sort of $5 patrons and up, in which people can kind of go chat and do their thing, and we do announcements every week. But I asked a question in there, and I asked a question on the Patreon page as well. I think he deliberately did it on the Patreon page so that you wouldn't see it on the Slack group. I'm guessing. Because have you seen any questions from Ian?
I've not seen any questions from Ian. He did send me a message about one, so I don't know.
Interesting. Maybe. Well, it's kind of down one of the veins you've already been, and you might have answered this slightly, but I think we can kind of peel it a little bit more. So Ian J. Middleton asks, how has your interest in stoicism impacted on your writing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's made me more productive, that's for sure, and it's made me more focused, and I don't worry about the things that were keeping me from writing. So they were things like reactions to reviews and looking at Twitter and not getting frustrated with the political situation or things like that. So yeah, it's helpful because it has kind of, I read a book a few years ago called The One Thing, which is about narrowing down your focus as a business into something very tangible that's very niche and focused. And I think you can do that with yourself as well. And so, there was all these things, all these influences that were chipping away at my mental bandwidth, or whatever you want to call it, and just kind of having the what's the word? Almost being brave enough to go, you know what, I don't follow the news now. I don't care. I'm not ignorant because I don't follow the news. I read a lot of history. I read a lot of philosophy. I know a lot about what I need to know, and this is like the Sherlock Holmes thing of, you know, when you read Sherlock Holmes and he knows a lot about poisons and all this stuff, and then I think Watson asks him about astronomy, and he's like, I don't care, I don't know. It's like completely irrelevant to what I'm doing. So yeah, just having the confidence, just go, I don't know about that, I don't care. You know, it's.
I wonder if that's a dying art form, just because, like you say, it's useful to be able to go deep into something rather than go shallow in absolutely everything. And I think because of the digital revolution, the age that we're in, the internet, absolutely everything, I think there's a leniency, a tendency to go towards the whole FOMO attitude of wondering if you're going to miss out on something, of people just feeling like they have to know every little thing about every little thing. And I think it's the people that do excel are the people that know what it is they're trying to achieve and have that big goal, and then just put everything else aside that isn't going to in some way step towards that goal. And it sounds like that's something that you're kind of putting into practice to make happen.
Yeah.
That's difficult as hell. Because I'm literally going through the same thing at the minute, where I'm not a perfect writer. I still get distracted by videos occasionally here and there, and like bits of social media, getting better at it. But then I'll go through phases where I'll have a week or so where I'll be fine, and then I'll have like a week or so where I just won't be. Have you got any tips for people who are trying to, I guess, streamline their productivity and make stuff happen?
Yeah. Okay. I have a writing computer, right? This is not connected to the internet. Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah. No, I considered this.
Yeah. Have a writing computer that isn't connected to the internet. When you're doing things like world building or things like that, try and do as much as you can on the fly. Almost have a mindset of, I need to get this shitty first draft out there. It needs to get done. You know, if I need to know something that is specific to a plot point, okay, I'll go and research that specifically, then I'll come away. And I won't look at any of the other videos that are connected to it or anything like that. It's just being disciplined to go, right, this is what I need to know at this moment, and then move away. And then with all the other world building things and little details, you can do those later. You know, like you wrote post-apoc, and when I did as well, it was like, you know, if you get guns wrong in post-apoc, then it'll hit you in the reviews.
Yep.
So I know that I needed to find out whether a revolver had a safety catch, but I didn't do that until I'd written the book. You know, until I'd done my first draft, because it was like, it's a detail. It's going to take me 15 minutes maybe to set up my laptop, log on to Windows, you know, it's like all those little tiny 1 minute jobs are actually 15-minute jobs that all add up. So yeah, just having a schedule as well is helpful, and going, right, I'm going to just spend the next 2 hours doing this. I know a lot of people talk about the Pomodoro thing. I don't like that, because I really like the idea of being in this flow state. So if I can do 2 hours of work where I'm just in a meditative zone, like, that's awesome and it feels great. So that's what I aim for, is just these solid blocks of uninterrupted brain splurge, I suppose you call it.
Yeah, nice. I did at one point look at there was I think it's called the Freewrite Scribbler, maybe Freewrite Traveler.
Okay, yeah.
Which I don't know if you've seen. That is basically, it's a keyboard with a tiny little e-ink display that lets you see sort of the last 2 or 3 lines that you've written and no more. And it's not connected to the internet. It's not. It's just like a little travel thing. But the only downside of they cost like £400, and you think you can get, if they brought them down to £100, I think that would be like the perfect thing for any writer, because they're small, they're on the go, you can get rid of the distractions. But I think having a specific system for one thing and a specific system for another thing, if you can, is a very, very good idea.
And it's worth the investment, to be honest, as well. And the other thing as well is I dictate, but I dictate into a portable recorder with a lapel mic. So I'm not looking at my screen until I've finished. So I'm literally just walking around, talking to myself. And I think the screens are just distraction engines. You know, if you can avoid your phones, if you can avoid, I turn off my internet most of the weekend, for example, on my phone, and, you know, little things like that where you're just not at the beck and call of notifications and attention and, you know, things like that. I mean, turn off all your notifications on everything. Don't have any pings, any sounds, even little flashy alerts, things like that. Anything that's just going to pull you away, because this flow state is really important when you're writing. If you can get that and you're in that like absolute absorption, that's killer. That's where the magic happens for me. And any distraction will bring you out of that, because it takes you about 20 minutes usually to get into it. So yeah, any distraction, just get rid of it.
Absolutely agree. Okay, so we are coming up to time, which means we're going to jump now into the quick fire round, which you have been through before, so you should be a pro at this. 10 quick questions I'm going to throw at you as quickly as I can. Give us your best answers. Do feel free to pass if any of them do stump you, but hopefully these will be quite nice. Okay, are you ready?
Go.
How tall are you?
5'8".
If you were stuck on a desert island and could only bring one person with you, who would it be?
My wife, clearly.
How many books?
But my son. I'm a bad dad.
How many books do you read per year?
Oh, it's at least 100.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
How quickly can you count to 10?
I don't know. 3 seconds, let's say.
We'll test that after. What one piece of advice would you give to a budding writer?
Don't be precious about your first draft. Just get it done.
When was the last time you stopped to smell the flowers?
This weekend. Yeah.
Would you rather be lost in space or lost 3,000 meters below the surface of the ocean?
Ocean, just because there's some really cool animals down there.
Who's your favorite writer?
Ask me tomorrow and it'll be different, but at the moment I would say Scott Lynch.
Nice. PC or Mac?
PC.
Perfect. And bonus question, where can our listeners find out more about everything you're up to and all of your work?
Jon's Author Diary is probably the best place. So that is JON Author Diary. So just find out wherever you get your podcasts. I'm also on the Sci-Fi Roundtable podcast, and everything else is joncronshaw.com.
Perfect. And I'll have links to all those in the show notes. But Jon, thank you very much for joining me. This has been fantastic and absolutely brilliant having you on.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sweet. And I'll speak to you guys next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Great Writer Share podcast. Next week, I'll be joined by BBC foreign correspondent and best-selling thriller author Humphrey Hawksley, discussing the changes in publishing over 30 years, life as a reporter, and how he approaches research. Don't forget you can get early access to every episode of the Great Writer Share podcast and the chance to ask upcoming guests any of your questions just by becoming a patron of the show. As mentioned earlier, from November through to December, anyone that becomes a $1 patron will reap all the rewards of $5 patronage. So to take advantage of that, all you need to do is jump over to www.patreon.com/greatwritershare and support the show for as little as $1 a month. Until next time.